Today, the 28th of September 2024. So, what are we going to study today? What are we going to do today? Okay. Last time we were talking about the activity we want to present in this occasion. So, it's about a forum, un personaje histórico. And according to the learning guide, let's see the learning guide. According to the learning guide, we're going to present 15 events of this person, this woman or this man, because it can be a woman or a man, doesn't matter. It could be a life, or maybe he or she has already died. I don't know when. But the idea is for us to type, to participate in the forums in Sayuna, telling who is this person and why is this person important in life, or why was he or she important, because might be dead, and all his story or her story is going to be mentioned using mainly simple past tense. That's why we studied simple past tense last week, and also we also studied the first part was the management of verbs like create, decide, believe, enjoy, or irregular verbs like do, drink, swim, and so on. Because the first part was intended to study how regular and irregular verbs in the simple past tense. Additionally, last time on Wednesday, we studied the second part of the simple past tense. So that was the verb to be, how we can use the verb to be. And we said that verb to be is used for the same reasons why we study the verb to be in simple present tense. I mean, in past and in present, the applicability is exactly the same. And we said that we wanted to study that in order to describe, to mention what our character is important for us. So right now we're going to study how to create a biography, because what the learning guide says, what the learning guide asks us to do is to present a biography of this person, like the biography of Mohandas Karamajit Gandhi, the biography of Nelson Mandela, the biography of Frida Kahlo, and so on. So we're going to focus now on creating a biography. So we already have the information, the needed information to create a biography, but now we're going to see the steps, the suggested steps to create a biography. So to create a biography, we can think in different steps to follow in order to make it to make this text um, conscious, organized, and with a timeline, with a correct timeline. So the steps to create a biography, in my opinion, and this is just a suggestion because you can decide to choose another possibility, are this. First of all, we're going to talk about his or her birth. So in this case, we always mention something like Fernando was born on a June 3rd, 1944. Let's suppose that. If you don't want to mention the date because maybe this person that you chose is we don't know the registers of his birth. For example, maybe it's an ancient pharaoh. Maybe we are not going to be able to know what's the specific year he or she was born, like a Hatshepsut. Maybe we don't know the name, the date. We could use the place, like this person was born in Czechoslovakia, in the Czech Republic today, for example, right? in a time that when there were not countries but empires, let's suppose that. After that, what's important to mention things about family, because the early childhood for a person in an early childhood, the family is the most important component of this person, because especially father and mother um, influence generate a huge influence on this person. So in terms of family, we could talk about brothers, sisters, parents, childhood, and so on. For example, this person lived with his parents until he was, I don't know, 10 years old, because her parents died in um in um in a strike. Let's suppose that I'm a little tragic here, or maybe like Pablo Neruda. I have been listening to the podcast about Pablo Neruda some hours ago, and the Uribe says that his mother died by tuberculosis when Pablo was 2 months old. I mean, when he was too young. So we could mention something like him, like that, for example. Or maybe this person was a orphan, didn't have a father or son, a father daughter, sorry, father mother, sorry, and he was raised by his elder brother. We could say something like that. To create a biography, this is the proposal to mention things about his or her biography, everything in past. For example, in terms of family, Christian Gomez had 3 sisters and 2 brothers, and we can compact that and say something like he had 3 siblings, because remember that when we mix brothers and sisters, the word that mixes that component is siblings, because the word siblings is the unification of brothers and sisters, like parents. What's the meaning of parents? Father and mother. Okay, so we could have, for example, between you and I, we have 4 parents. I mean, your father, my father, your mother, my mother, for example. We could also talk about names in terms of family. So Gabriela Mistral's parents' names were, let's suppose, Christian and Violeta Gonzalez, let's suppose. I'm just guessing. What else is important to mention about the biography? It's important to talk about the childhood, what this person lived when he or she was too young, when he was a child. We could say things like where he or she lived, what were his passions. Maybe he or she had an incredible best friend, like for example, Alan Turing. Alan Turing's childhood was very, according to the movie, he had an incredible friend who had cancer, I guess, cancer, and he was the only friend he had when he was in high school in England in before the Second World War, for example, in the middle of the First World War, I guess. So what's important of this your character in his or her childhood, in early childhood, for example. Let's suppose Fernando lived in Bristol until he was 7 years old, until he was 15 years old, let's suppose that, and then he moved to London, for example. We could say something like that. About childhood, it's also important to talk about friends, right, and the environment. For example, what was happening in the country that made an influence in this person's life. For example, for Pablo Neruda, I am telling you about Pablo Neruda because I was listening to this podcast, so I have some memories about this because it's too early. We could say something like that in Chile on those days, in the beginning of the 20th century, I mean, from the 1900s until the 2000s, Chile was living a period of a lot of inequality, even today, right? But it was being open to the markets, and this inequality made a lot of influence to Neruda's life, for example. So this is the childhood. Let's go. I mean, what's the environment he was living in? Let's go with education. What kind of education this person had? Maybe he or she didn't have any kind of education. It is possible, especially if we are choosing a person from the 17th, 15th, 12th century, right? Because education was not common on those days. In fact, we owe the elementary and high school education to Napoleon Bonaparte, because before Napoleon Bonaparte, the French king, the French emperor, a education was only acceptable for elites, for rich people, but not for everyone. So Napoleon Bonaparte universalized the idea of education, that everybody had to be educated. So once again, if we're choosing a person from the 12th century, 11th century before Christ, for example, it's highly probable that this person were not didn't have any formal education. I mean, he probably learned everything by experience. It's possible, depending on the person you are choosing. So about education, we could say something like, this person studied languages in, I don't know, in Australia, and he or she became the um, a Nobel Prize in literature Nobel Prize. We could say something like that, depending on the person once again. Or maybe he went or she went to this university and studied this degree, or maybe she or he didn't study at all because he didn't have the resources to do it. Maybe so. In terms of education, we could talk a lot. High school, elementary school, university, PhD, masters, and so on. What else is important to talk about a person? It's important to talk about the marriage. Maybe this person got married. Maybe she was always single. Or maybe she got divorced. Or maybe he got um, she's a widow, right? I mean, his couple died when he was too old, maybe. So about marriage, we could talk about the partner, a life's partner of this person. For example, for Frida Kahlo, her lifetime partner was Diego Rivera. So when Frida Kahlo died, if Diego Rivera was a widowed, right? So he was married to her, but when she died, he was a widowed, right? What's the marriage? Because people around us influence us, makes a huge influence on our lives. We could say things like that. For example, how in terms of these painters, how Frida Kahlo made a huge influence on Diego Rivera's life and vice versa. We could talk about this in terms of marriage, right? About children, maybe this person could have a daughter, a son, a 5, 10, whatever. For example, Donald Trump. He has, I guess, 4 children, I guess, 3 daughters and 1 son, I guess. I'm not really sure. So if we were talking about Donald Trump, for example, we could say he had 3 children, three daughters with same with his first wife, and one another son with his second wife. For example, it is possible to say this, or talking about Marx, from Karl Marx, he had 3 daughters with the same wife. We could say things like that with family, and take that into account. that in terms of chronology, the birth, family, childhood, education, and marriage, and children until now, all of these events are mentioned in terms of chronology. So that's coherent with what the learning guide asks us to do to present in our activity, because we are talking about his early childhood when he was 5 years old, then 7, then 10, 15, 20, 50 years old, right? So it's coherent to take into account this proposal for you to present um, your biography, because the learning guide asks us to present to talk about 15 events of his or her life, right? From a person that's important in history. So, in other words, what the learning guide is asking us to present is a biography. And when the learning guide asks us to present these events in a sequence in order, so it's coherent to mention these events in organized in terms of time. So that's why this organization, in my opinion, seems too coherent to talk about birth, family, childhood, education, marriage, children. So let's continue with the next activity, job. With the next topic, we could talk about our chosen person. Normally, people are important, are well known, are recognized by other people, by the world, in terms of independently of what he does or she does, because of his or her job, because of their activity, because of their contribution for humanity. And this kind of contribution is normally related in his or her job, like an actor, like an actress, like a singer, like a president, like a prime minister, like an emperor, right? And these activities he or she does are the most commonly known in our in our context, in our culture, right? So, for example, talking about Neruda, we could say that he was a writer, a famous writer, a Nobel Prize winner, for example. Or, for example, with Pablo Picasso, he was an important, recognized painter who lived in Spain, and he painted the Guernica from that relates in what happened in this Spanish city before the Second World War, for example, that was destroyed by the Nazis. Or, for example, let's suppose a president, let's suppose I forgot this name, Obama, Barack Obama. He was the first Afro-American president in this history of the United States. So, what did he do? What's his activity? What was his or her activity, and why was he or she important in for us in terms of history? Example of this: she first worked as a cook in a restaurant, but then she became a journalist, for example, right? This is a possibility. Related to the job of this person, we could talk about the reasons for him or her to be a celebrity in our opinion. Why is he important in our opinion? So this person is famous because he abolished the slavery in the world, maybe, right? Um, I forgot the name of this guy. Christopher Columbus is a celebrity because he discovered America, and he colonized a lot of places in Latin America, and he opened the doors to the new trading routes between the new continent and the old continent. Or, for example, Simon Bolivar. He was important. He is recognized because he liberated Venezuela, Colombia, Panama, and Ecuador from the Spaniards of those days. Right. So why is he or she important? Why is he or she a celebrity in your opinion, right? And in the last topic, because we are not eternal, we are going to we are going to die. Maybe the person you chose is already dead. Maybe he or she is still alive, and that's great because we could say something like, for example, today, he lives with his family in the city of Belgrado, right? In the city of Belgrado, in and he is happily married, for example, with his wife. This is something that's happening today. But if he or she is not dead, he or she is already dead because you chose a person, a character from the 17th century, sorry, before of Christ. Let's suppose that we could say something like he died on this year, on this date, or he died because of this illness like cancer, heart attack, diphtheria, or something like that. Or, for example, like Salvador Allende, who committed suicide protecting the La Moneda. This is the kind of Palacio de Nariño in Colombia, or Casa Rosada in Argentina. He committed suicide doing this. Or maybe, like the parents of Batman, he committed, they were murdered by a criminal in Gotham after watching um, a performance in the opera. Let's suppose that. So we can mention many things about this person's life, and this is the proposal order of the events. So in this case, for example, in birth, family, childhood, education, marriage, children, job, reasons for celebrity, and death, we here have 9 events, different kind of events. We could mention about his or her life, and we could repeat things like, for example, in education, he got his PhD on this, and I don't know, in terms of celebrity, he won the Nobel Prize, and the other reason why is he a celebrity or important for us is because he donated all his money for charity, for example, and take into account that here we are mentioning everything in simple past tense, because the idea of mentioning a biography is to use, in this case, in the learning guide, is to use mainly the simple past tense. Okay, so this is a suggestion, a, a proposal for you to create a biography. I'm going to share with you this document for you to take into account. So I guess you are going to take many ideas from them. Okay, so this is how can we create a biography. I'm going to give you an example of this in a moment. Another example in a moment. So taking that into account, knowing that these are the most important aspects or criteria we could take into account to present a biography, let's see how, I mean, we already have the organization, but how are we going to create our sentences, our ideas, to mention the biography of our character, right? So this is one more suggestion for you to take into account. The first part, to create a biography, and this is a suggestion once again, is to create short and easy sentences. I mean, use the simple past tense here. Use the simple past tense using the verb to be or any other regular or irregular verbs, right? Everything in simple past tense. So create something short and easy, right? For example, with his birth, he was born in Colombia. This is simple past tense. We already studied that with verb to be on Wednesday, and this is an example of that. He was born in Colombia on February 2nd, 1957. This is just an example. About the family, once again, short and easy sentences. This is the first step. For example, Mariano Spira Perez had two brothers. Mariano Spina Perez had one sister. Mariano Spina Perez, or more precisely, his parents were lawyers. I'm just guessing words. I'm not sure. I don't know Mariano Spina Perez's life, so I'm just guessing. But this is just an example, okay? Or maybe Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner had two brothers. She had one sister, and her parents were um, architects, and this is possible. So look, 1, 2, 3, 4 sentences using only simple past tense, where the important thing here is to take into account the verbs. So that's the important thing to take into account. The verb and context. Okay, that's why we spent a lot of time studying verbs, regular verbs and irregular verbs, right? Because the past form is what differentiate the simple present tense from the simple past tense, the verb. This is the main difference between these two sentences. Okay. Okay, let's go with childhood. What can we say? What can we talk about childhood? For example, Cristina Gomez didn't live with her parents, and this is a negative sentence. Remember that with negative sentences in simple past tense, we use the auxiliary verb did and the word not. Did not, or the contraction didn't. And let's remember too that the main verb doesn't change. I mean, it's in its verb form in infinitive, right? For example, in this case, she didn't live with her parents. She lived with her aunt in Medellin in her childhood, for example, right? What about education? For example, we could say, I'm going to mix between man and woman, okay? So you can follow my examples. So Gabriel Quintero wanted to be a doctor. He studied hard. He studied medicine at Clínica Mayo, let's suppose. In 1973, he graduated with honors. So once again, what is important here is to create short, short and easy sentences. And the most important thing to take into account with these sentences are the verbs, all of them in past. Want, present, wanted, past. Study, present, studied, past. Graduate, present, graduated, past. Live, present, lived, past. Here, take into account also the pronunciation of these regular verbs, right? Something that we have already studied. Let's go with marriage. We could say, for example, that he or she married, or maybe he or she never got married, right? For example, there's a queen, there was a queen from a daughter from Henry VIII and Anna Bolena, who was called the Virgin Queen, and it was because she never got married, and she was called the Virgin Queen, and this girl is Isabel. So she created the Isabellian era in England, and she never got married. she didn't get married, for example, and she created a huge empire with the British Empire, later known as the British Empire. But getting married or being single doesn't is not a synonym, is not required to get children, right? Because you can be single and have children, or you can get married and have no children, and that's possible. So in this case, for example, Christian Gomez had one son, maybe, or what I said about Marx, Karl Marx, he had three daughters, for example, right? And he had no grandchildren, for example. What about Job? For example, on July 3rd, 1981, she started to work at this place, right? Because according to this example, this person wanted to be a doctor, right? Reasons for fame. Why is he or she considered a celebrity? Okay, it's important for us because Fernando began to search and develop a cure for AIDS, para el SIDA. Very important today, for example. She found the cure for AIDS in 1991, let's suppose that. And then he donated all his money to charity because he didn't want to, he was a philanthropist. He loved humanity, for example. This is why, in our opinion, this is why he was important, right? And finally, maybe he is already dead. Maybe, we don't know yet. This depends on you. Depends on the character you chose, I mean. That's what I meant. Okay, for example, she died in Bogota at the age of 91 years old, and this is possible, right? These are some examples of short, easy sentences of something we have already studied about simple past tense. Okay? Let's go with the part two, because the part one was to create easy and short sentences. All of them have in common that all of them are in simple past tense, right? The second step, this is just an example, this is just a proposal for you to create your biography. And not only your biography, all kind of texts, okay? The second part is to connect your sentences. To do that, I'm going to talk about punctuation. Let's remember that most of the time, not always, but most of the time, telling you be careful with the punctuation, right? A period, a comma, a parenthesis, the braces, I mean, and so on, because these are important. And conjunctions, what are conjunctions? Words that connect a sentence with another sentence, right? Like and, but, not only, but also, however, and so on. For example, everything we have mentioned here in terms of chronology, born in terms of birth, family, childhood, education, and so on, can be related in one paragraph like this. Cristina was born in Colombia on February 2nd, 1957. Period. She had two brothers and one sister. Period. Her parents were lawyers. Everything's connected because of the punctuation and the conjunctions, right? Another paragraph. She didn't live with her parents. However, but she lived with her aunt in Medellin. She wanted to be a doctor. Therefore, for instance, she studied hard. Look at that. Everything's mixed, everything's joined because of the punctuation and the conjunctions. right? Part 3, this is my third part, this proposal for you to take into account to follow to create your text. You could provide a context to your text, and the words that provide a context are adverbs. You already studied that in level 3, especially frequency adverbs like never, always, usually, frequently, hardly ever, and so on. Those are adverbs, words that provide a context. For example, it's different to say Christian walks. Okay, that's good. But with the context, we could say Christian walks fast, Christian walks slowly, Christian walks with elegance, right? These three words generate a different context: fast, slow, slowly, or with elegance. That this is very different, and this is an adverb. This is the idea of an adverb. One thing is to play. One thing is to play. Okay, we play. Okay, that's easy to understand. But it's different to say we play outside, we play indoors, we play upstairs, downstairs, right? These four places provide a different context. Another example, we went to the concert. Okay, this is understandable. Okay, but we we went to the concert yesterday, last month, last week, on last Tuesday. Is going to provide us a different moment of time, right? So this is the context. This is the idea of an adverb. In this case, for example, is mentioned in green, and I'm going to mention the sentences in with the adverbs. So in this case, for example, Felipe never lived with his parents. Instead of saying he didn't live with his parents, the possibility here is a little more interesting when we say he never lived with his parents. He always lived with his aunt. We have something here, but he lived with his aunt. It's when we use adverbs, our sentences get a little more power, are more powerful. But he lived, always lived. He always lived with his aunt. And the last one, he wanted to be a doctor, so he always or frequently studied hard, right? It's different to say he studied hard than saying he always, frequently, normally studied hard. The context is more powerful when we use adverbs. A context. And the fourth step to create a text is to avoid repetition in order to improve your text, right? This is a better example. For example, Cristina was born in Ibagué, Colombia on February 2nd, 1957, period. Her parents were lawyers, but she never lived with them. Let's remember this part. Let's compare them. She was born in Colombia, and this is even better. She was born in Ibagué, Colombia. The original. She had two brothers and one sister. I'm sorry. She never lived with her parents, but she lived with her aunt. And and here we have her parents were lawyers, but she never lived with them. With who? With her parents. Instead, she lived with her aunt in Medellin. Her aunt called Maria. And this is an important name because she made a lot of influence on his life, right? Because Maria was a nurse and she taught him to topics about medicine. Let's suppose, I'm just guessing, but this is an example of how to create a better text, right? In the original form, he had 2 brothers and 1 sister. The improvement, she had 3 siblings, 2 brothers and 1 sister, because remember that siblings is the mix between brothers and sisters. Like parents. Parents is the summary of your father and your mother. Okay? And the 5th step, and in my opinion, the most important step, is for you to be creative, have fun, enjoy the process, and especially celebrate your achievements, because only you know how hard it was to do something to achieve your goals. Only you know the amount of effort you have put in, you have brought to the table, right? And you know how difficult or hard it has been for you to do something. And I'm not only talking about a text, I'm also talking about your life. Okay? So these are the steps, the suggestions to create a biography in this case, but a text in general. To create short and easy sentences, in this case, they have to be in order in terms of chronology, right? That's why we talk about birth, family, childhood, education, marriage, children, job, reasons for fame and death. If this person is dead, then connect the sentences using punctuation and conjunctions, right? After that, if you want, you could provide a context, use adverbs. Then you could improve your text by avoiding repetition. And finally, and in my opinion, the most important part is to be creative, have fun doing this, have fun doing the exercise, and especially celebrating your achievements. These are the steps to create a text, in my opinion. That these are this is a proposal. So to do that, we could also take another example. We could also mention something in another strategy. We already mentioned that when we were creating these short and easy sentences, we said that the difference between simple present tense and simple past tense is mostly the main verb, regular or irregular verb. That's why I asked you last time to take into account this text and first of all, identify the verbs in past. Doesn't matter if they are regular or irregular. For example, he jumped back into the taxi and told the driver to take him home. In this case, the main verbs are in past, are jumped and told. Tell, told, and jump, jumped, right? The first step. The second step is for us, for example, to take a text in simple present tense and to modify this same text in past. For example, in present would be the Smurfs is a cartoon from the 80s. The Smurfs live in a village and Papa Smurf is their leader. How can we modify this text? In past, we must take into account the verb, the main verb. In this case, the Smurfs was a cartoon from the 80s. The Smurfs lived in a village, and Papa Smurf was their leader. He didn't wear a white hat as the other Smurfs. His hat was red. This is an example of how to create a text from present by modifying the verbs, and by doing that, we are creating the same text in past. This is the other option if we already have a bigger text, for example, because I have seen in many evidences that most of you, most of my students, present a text in present. Okay, we already have the present. How can we present now the activity in past. Okay, we are going to focus mainly in the verbs. Mainly, not only because the context is also important, but the verbs are going to modify our text. And finally, I'm going to share with you, I'm going to give you the link right now in the chat. This is another example of a biography. Once again, the important part here is to take into account the main verbs, right? This is an example of Frida Kahlo's biography. This is an example of what we are going to present in our evidence in the forum. Frida Kahlo was a Mexican painter. In this case, we are giving an introduction, nothing else, right? Then, she born in Mexico City in 1907. This is her birth. Sorry. Let's go with family. Okay. She painted many self-portraits and paintings of Mexican folklore. Okay, this is why she is important, but we are not talking about family yet. Let's go with childhood, for example. Okay, she went to the prestigious Escuela Preparatoria in Mexico City in 1922. At that time, there were not many girls at school, and here we are talking about childhood and education, right? This is the chronology of her chronology. In 1925, at the age of 15, Frida had a terrible traffic accident. In this case, we are talking about childhood now. She could not walk for a long time, so she started painting. In this case, we're mixing childhood and reasons for fame, because reasons for fame are not necessarily mentioned at the end of our biography. It could be mentioned many times, right? So we started with reasons for fame at the beginning. We are mentioning now in her childhood, and we are going to mention them, the reasons in the end. So in 1929, she married the painter Diego Rivera. Once again, we are talking about now marriage. And because of her accident, she couldn't have children. Therefore, this is not going to be mentioned. Work. Next year, she moved to New York, but Frida was not happy there. In this case, we're talking about her job once again. They returned to Mexico in 1935. Frida won a National Art Prize in 1946, and she became famous in Mexico. These are the reasons for fame, her reasons to be famous, the reasons for her to be famous. She died in 1954 when she was only 47 years old. Once again, this is the order in terms of death. So, in this case, we talked about her birth, her childhood, her education, her marriage, her job, her reasons to be famous, and her death. The order is pretty much the same. It's not exactly the same, but it's pretty much. So this is an example of a biography we are going to present in the forum. So where are we going to find the forum? We already studied this, we already mentioned this, but it's important to do a recap. We go to Sayuna. In Sayuna, we go to our course, English level, English as Word level 4. We go to Guía de Aprendizaje, Foro Personaje Histórico, and in here we type Añadir nuevo tema, we type our intervention, and finally we click in Enviar al foro. So that's the activity for this session, for this week. And next week we are going to talk about the test. Okay, so this is it. This is the activity we are going to present in this occasion. Okay, so Michelle, I guess you have already presented your activity. Michelle Joanna. Okay, so I'll check it in a moment, not yet. As soon as we finish the class, I'll give you the feedback. Okay, okay, so I don't know if you have any questions. I don't know if you have any proposals, suggestions, feedback to mention. If you don't have any questions, that would be all. If you have any comment, I'll wait for you. If no, I'll finish the session now. Okay, I guess you have no questions, therefore I'm going to stop the recording